Welcome, all you wiretappers out there to Gangland Wire. I'm here in the Gangland Wire studio on actually an unseasonably warm day and 60 degrees here in Kansas City just before Christmas. This won't come out till later on in the year, probably in January maybe. But I have a man. I have a man on the line who has one heck of a story, and it's a lot colder where he is. His name is Alain Olivier. And he spent, I believe, 8 years in a prison in Thailand. Now, any of you guys, when you were young, if you're kind of action-oriented guys, everybody's thought about making that one big score. Just go to Mexico or go to some other country and buy a bunch of dope real cheap and bring it back and sell it, make a big amount of money. But you always hear those stories about spending time in a Turkish prison or in a Asian prison or a Mexican prison. Well, Alain has done it, and he's here to tell us all about it. It's really an interesting story. Alain, welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I'm really happy to have you here. I watched that movie. Most Wanted is the name of it down here in the United States on Amazon Prime, and Josh Hartnett is the lead in it. And I didn't recognize the name of the man that played you, but it grabbed me. I'll tell you what, Alain, that movie grabbed me.
Jim Gaffigan as well.
And Jim Gaffigan.
Playing crazy role. Believe me, we'll have a chance to discuss that.
Yeah, really. We're going to talk about that. Folks, Jim Gaffigan, the comedian, played Heavy, the bad guy, and he did it good. He did a psychopath. He did a little bit too good, like, damn.
Believe me.
So several years ago, Alain, a court in Thailand sentenced you to 100 years in prison, and that was to avoid a death sentence for drug smuggling. And yet here you are up in sunny Montreal and out of freezing cold Thailand. Oh, I've got that backwards, don't I? Sunny Thailand and freezing Montreal. But anyhow, how did this get started? I guess let's just kind of start at the beginning.
You want to start from the start?
Yeah, kind of like when you were young.
Yeah,
tell us about your life.
80s, after I got out of school as a forest ranger, I went on the road after that with different bands to play music, and we were partying hard for many years, and I decided to move to Vancouver just to get away from all that. And when I got in Vancouver, I started doing tree plantings. And at the end of my planting season, I ended up traveling over to Southeastern Asia. I went to Malaysia, Thailand, Burma. I went to Nepal, and I came back here after like 3 months overseas, where I got hooked on heroin. And upon my return to Gibson's Landing, where I was living near Vancouver, I was introduced to a guy going by the name of Glenn Howard Barry. Unknown to me, that guy was RCMP paid civil agent. He worked as an informant, but he was getting paid by the information he was providing to the RCMP. And at the time I came back, I was hooked on heroin, and I brought back a few grams from Kathmandu, Nepal, of brown sugar, just to cut down my habit, not to be sick too quickly and go through very, very severe withdrawal. And Glenn Barry find out that I had brought back some, and he invited me on his boat, and we partied with him. He did some cocaine with us and smoked weed and took us out fishing salmon and everything. And at some point, he asked me if I'd like to get into the charter business with him. And I agreed. So that would be a nice thing. And foremost, as I was going back to work, I got an accident. I almost lost my left eye, and that's the reason why I had to stay in Gibson. And he offered me to work with him since I didn't have any money. And the farm where I was living on was sold while I was in the hospital for the surgery. He offered me to stay on his boat. And after several trips out fishing salmon with him, he asked me on many occasions if I would like to make money quick. And I told him I wasn't interested. I was going back to work in the forest and everything. And after a couple of weeks, he decided to go for a month, and he let me to take charge of Gibson charter and take people out fishing for a whole month. And when he came back, he told me that he had gone to Colombia to purchase a full container of cocaine with his friends, and that now the container was being taken back to Vancouver. And shortly after that, he kept asking me if I'd like to make money, and he said that he had talked to his friends and everything. And after a trip that we went out fishing July, that was July 18, 1987, during the Sea Cavalcade in Vancouver, in Gibson's Landing, where I ended up meeting two of his friends. One was Barry Bennett, and the other one was Dennis Massey. Two guys dressed like those guys in the movie Miami Vice, in the series Miami Vice in the 80s, with Hawaiian shirt and slacks and loafers and gold chains and everything. And they made me Glenn Barry had gone to tell them that I had brought back like some 100 grams of heroin from Thailand, which was totally false, since I only brought back less than 7 grams for myself. And these guys, after a moment talking with them, they asked me if I would like to go to Thailand to introduce them to a source of heroin over there. And I told them, like I did to Glenn Barry, I said, I'm not interested in that. I have a job and I'm going to go back to my job. And to make a long story short, a week later, Barry Bennett came back to the marina to borrow the boat I stayed on for the whole weekend. And when he came back on that Friday morning, July 24, 1987, he was with another stranger, a tall guy that I had never met. And they decided to go to rent the boat for, actually, they didn't rent it. Glenn Barry lent the boat to these guys, and they were going to Vancouver Island, apparently over Nanaimo or something like that. Actually, that was Chimenez. And 3 days later, Barry Bennett came back, and as I waited for the boat at the dock, I couldn't see the other tall guy on the boat. And the previous day, Glenn Barry told me that Bennett had gone to kill the guy, and he started laughing. I thought he was only making a joke, but when I saw Bennett coming alone on a boat, as soon as I tied the boat at the dock, Barry Bennett walked out and just started walking on the dock, just pushing me on the way and staring at me with his cold, bloody eyes. And that was just freeze my blood. And as I looked inside the boat, as my eyes were going around, all of a sudden I started to see splatters of blood. And then I saw one empty casing of 9 millimeter on the floor. Then I turned around and I saw a second empty casing. And as I went to pick up these bullets, I was started freaking out. I was wondering what the fuck did go happen over there, and I realized that they had killed a guy. That's the first impression that I had. So I took the two bullets to Glenn Barry, and I told him, I said, "Hey, what the hell is this? We have customers coming over here." And he started pushing me. He says, "You don't say a fucking word about this, otherwise the same thing will happen to you." And he says, "For now on, that you want it or not, you're part of it." I had manipulated the empty casing, and now it's like I had manipulated element of a sign, a murder scene.
Really? So now, Elaine, let me ask you a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
First of all, how old were you when you first started down this path with Glenn Barry?
When I met Glenn Barry, I was 27 years old.
And how old was he?
He was like 40 years old. He was born May 1st, 1949, if I remember.
Okay, so there was like a huge age difference and experience
Yeah.
difference. It sounds like you've been working in the forest. You had, blending bands. You didn't have much, real life business,
No,
criminal kind of experience. It doesn't sound like. Had you even been arrested or been in jail for anything other than maybe
never,
something minor before?
never at all. But what made this even more particular is that when Glenn Barry gave them my birth date, the RCMP made a criminal background check on everything, and the criminal record came out that didn't belong to me, but to another guy whose last name was Olivier. And that guy had a serial of criminal offenses for drugs and violence and I think weapons and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, the RCMP, they thought I was him. And that's why they came to Gibson and they did that murder scenario to make me believe that they were members of the a crime family in Vancouver, that they were members of the mob. They wanted to erase any doubt on my mind that they could be cops.
Wow, that was pretty slick on their part. I've never even I've
But
done a lot of undercover things and used people in
it's
many ways, but I've never taken a kid like that or a young person and set them up quite like that. That was wow.
I was the first victim of Mr. Big in Canada. The Mr. Big scheme that the RCMP ran in Canada and are still running, but at
Uh,
the time it didn't have that name. The same guy who put that on the RCMP agenda, the Mr. Big scheme, his name was Peter Marsh, Sergeant Peter Marsh from E Division in Richmond, BC. He's dead now. He died a few years ago, but he was the guy who initiated and created this old program back in 1987 at E Division, the same division as Barry Bennett and Dennis Massey and the others were working. So, and by coincidence, the guy who was heading their crime family, the as a mob guy, was his name was the Fat Man.
oh yeah,
And believe me, Gary, I've seen big guys in my life, but this guy was big.
it was the fat man. So
Not
I
tall,
have
but
another question about this.
yeah,
This
go
is
ahead.
most interesting. So what you're telling me is the RCMP, the famous bonded, Dudley Do Right Mounties of Canada, their investigative division, which a lot of people don't really realize. Down in the United States, we had this idea about, this tall, broad-shouldered, blue-eyed, square-jawed guy with a hat riding a horse. That's the only Mounties we've seen wearing a red coat. So they have a whole undercover narcotics unit and investigative units for other crimes are like the state police, it sounds like, or like the federal, yeah, like if the FBI had a uniform division, I believe, as well as detectives. So they set up a scenario and they ended up calling it Mr. Big, and maybe they even invented it from you, where they would
It
draw a
started
guy,
with
yeah, where they would draw a guy in like you who was maybe didn't exactly know that wasn't that hip and didn't know what was going on in order to do a sting on him or get him to the mark, if you will, do what they wanted. They would draw you in and then start put you in a compromising position, or at least what you thought was a compromising position,
sure
and then
was.
come down on you and then
Yeah,
make you bend you to do what they wanted you to do.
that was
Which
it.
in the United States that would become entrapment in the
But
end.
in Canada also, we have a law on entrapment since the 80s with Antonio Lamer, the Justice Lamer, who had the what made really jurisprudence in Canada, the Mac case. And they have like 10 different elements that contributes to be entrapment in law. And for later on, we'll talk about it, about the trial. But the RCMP never thought that I would be able to prove that that they acted such scenario on the boat, and it's only because another guy in Vancouver who was arrested in that same operation after I was arrested in Thailand. One of the witnesses came forward because I sent them a letter about the fact that they had did that they had done that on the boat. And that's the only reason they managed to prove it in court. Because when they questioned Glenn Barry about it, about the day that Barry Bennett taking someone out on the boat, the blood on the boat, and the empty 9 millimeter casing. Glenn Barry said, "Yeah, it's true that we did that." So they couldn't deny it. It happened.
Yeah,
So, they said in court that was for my own benefit if they did that. So imagine.
hmm.
Yes, and we
Crazy.
do have entrapment. It's only that the court needs to enforce it when time comes to do so.
Yeah. So now they've got you scared. You think you are a witness to a mob murder, and they brought in Mr. Big, kind of the closer in the used car business. He would be, or the car business, he'd be called the closer, the guy that comes in and puts the hammer down, says, yeah, you have to do what we ask you to do. And so tell me what happened then. How did that work play out?
After that murder scenario, I moved away from Gibson's Landing, but Glen Barry came to, he's the one who drove me an hour and a half away because I wanted to get away from him. And they started jets to Glenbarry foremost, started to visit me up the coast where I was working on a sea fish farm and salmon farm. I mean, and he started to come to tell me, "You won't get away like this. You won't make me lose face before my friends." I told them that you were able to bring back heroin to Canada and from Thailand. This is when I told him, was, by the way, I says, I never brought any heroin back from Thailand. The little bit I brought back was from Kathmandu. But that guy managed, imagine that guy is a master fisherman, first of all. He was an iron worker before, but got a big accident. He's from a small village on the east coast here. He spent his whole life fishing. He's a master fisherman, but he got these guys to believe that I was running all the heroin trade on the coast. And when they checked my birthday, they did the background check. They were sure that I was their man. And they started for 18 months to chase me all across Canada to make sure that I would go along with their scheme. They offered me 10% of all the drugs they would buy over there. And I was a junkie. And they were offering me up to a kilo of heroin to help them out. And they were delivering it right in Vancouver at the door. I didn't have to do anything. They had plane pilot, cleaning crew at the airport, and so on. Like a real criminal organization. I mean, and they played the role well, believe me, because these guys in Vancouver, when I look back at all the history of the RCMP in Vancouver since there is a complaint commission against the RCMP here in Canada. The commission opened at the time I was arrested in Canada, in Thailand, in fact. The RCMP in Vancouver, at some point, they had few thousand complaints every year against them from Canadian citizens who had been victimized by them in one form or another. And even myself, I did come to work with not work with the complaint, but I did file complaint. We'll talk about it later on.
Okay.
But for 18 months, they threatened me. They made offers to me of 10% reward if I was going along with them. They were to pay my plane ticket, and they did pay my expenses. They did pay for my expenses, including all the money I needed to buy my drugs once in Thailand. And when they saw that I was to they even went as far, Glenbarry went as far as to say, if you don't come along with us, if you don't do as we are telling you, we're going to go after your own family.
Interesting. Boy, they put the pressure on you. So they get you, they almost like kidnap you and get you on the plane. It looked like in the airport. Was that have some reality to it?
But few hours before leaving to Thailand, after they purchased my plane ticket and everything, when I arrived in Vancouver, they picked me up at the airport and brought me down to some shaggy motel over Burnaby or New Westminster, I mean, and near the airport, a few minutes away. And as I entered my room, who was there? Glen Barry. And they let me alone with him. He had few things to tell me before my departure. And he made it clear to me that if I wasn't doing as they were telling me, and if ever things didn't work out in Thailand, they were to fucking kill me. And if it wasn't them, he was to kill me.
Boy. So you get over to Thailand. Well, you don't really know anybody, particularly in Thailand. it doesn't sound to me like maybe you met some people when you were just backpacking around over there and doing a little
You,
heroin.
you know, I found that tuk-tuk driver in Thailand
Yeah, you
because
found.
someone over here in Canada knew a Quebecer who used to go to Thailand. The guy was a junkie and he knew porn. The guy we're talking about in my book, he knew that guy. He says if you go see porn in Thailand and you go to the porn hotel, he's a tuk-tuk driver, a rickshaw driver, and he will be able to find whatever you need. So I went to Thailand with that picture of that guy in Quebec
Yeah.
who was with his wife, and I only showed that picture to that tuk-tuk driver and told him this guy is my friend. I didn't even know that guy. It was a friend of a friend of a friend. You understand? This is how I did get to that source over there, which was not even a source. That guy usually only sold few grams to tourists here and there to be able to feed his three kids and his wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
He wasn't playing in the big league with the Chinese Triads or anything like that. His sister was supposed to do the deal with the RCMP, but the so-called mob gang from Vancouver, she was a hairdresser living on the outskirts of Chiang Mai in a slum. I mean, like I said, we're not talking about triads and big Chinese mafia and big, I mean, in a big circle of heroin. I know what it is now because I spent time with guys with me in prison who were there for tons of heroin. I mean, I spent years with them. I know what it is now.
Interesting. So to kind of encapsulate, you get over there, you find Porn, Porn, who is a
Yeah,
rickshaw driver, a tuk tuk driver, and he hangs out in front of this hotel called Porn. And you find him, he can't really do it, but then he, through his wife, finds some other hairdresser that could maybe come up with a little bit of heroin. And at this time,
that was his sister, actually.
his okay, his sister.
Yeah,
And at that time, the RCMP has brought a whole small squad of men over
yeah.
to take care of this,
There were
and
five of them.
five of them. And
Yeah.
so, did you
Six.
see them? Did you know they were there? How many were there? What did you?
When I arrived in Chiang Mai a few days later, I met them in a room at the Chiang Mai Orchid Hotel, and as far as I knew, there was only Barry Bennett, Jack Duck, the fat man, actually, Jack the fat man Duck, Derek Flanagan, the one who got killed, and Jim Girdlestone, who was supposed to be their so-called plane pilot. And there were the four of them, but I didn't meet Girdlestone right away because he was in another room recording the old conversation in the room I was in. So that there was Jack the Fat Man Dope, Derek Flanagan, and Barry Bennett. And I met them on the Friday. I got them to meet Porn's sister the day after, and she came to me, and I brought them in a slum. And at some point, someone knocked on her door, a small kid, and whispered something to her, and she came back and she took me to another room and she said, I'm not dealing with your friend. I'm sure they are cops. And I said, they cannot be cops. These guys, for heaven's sakes, they killed someone on my boat, the boat I live on.
Yeah.
And more than that, Barry Bennett, during those 18 months, they were chasing me. According to Glenn Barry, had killed also Dennis Massey that I had met with him the week before the murder scenario because Massey was out of line. So the killing was just continuing on
Wow.
as the operation went on. And in
So
Thailand, they were the one who paid for my plane ticket, my expenses, my food, the money for my drugs. And after she told me that, I kept thinking it's not possible. Bennett killed that guy. He killed that guy. So finally, the deal was canceled, and I had to walk Bennett and Flanagan out of the slum. They were shitting their pants. And we went back to the hotel, and there, Jacked Up was fucking fuming that things didn't work out. And the day after, they got to meet Poor than two other guy that they got them to meet, and it didn't work out. And at some point in the room, Bennett says, if this thing doesn't fucking work out, there's going to be some fucking unhappy people back home.
Really? So tell me. Oh, I'm gonna cut in right here. I'll cut this out. You are taking your hand. You're clicking something down there. You're like tapping your kind of nervously tapping your hand on the
Okay,
table
sorry.
there. That's
Yeah.
okay. We do those things, and we don't. We haven't. You don't really realize you're doing them. And as you got into this part of the story, I could see the emotion coming up in your face. And so let me make a note of what time this is, and I'll take this little bit out here.
You'll see my emotion when we
Yeah.
get further down the line.
Really? Okay. All right. Well, that's what makes a good story, isn't it? Okay. So
As I said, once in Chiang Mai, they were in total control of me. And after the deal done worked out, when Bennett says there's going to be some fucking unhappy people back home if this thing doesn't fucking work out, for me, it was like the kiss of death. And the fat man who had it up, few of his words, he says, we've been waiting for this a long time, Alan, with a very sinister voice. So I had to do something. So at some point, I talked to Porn again right after that. And shortly after, in the afternoon, he came back to see me. He says, I found probably someone else, two other girls who would be able to get these guys whatever they want. And he brought me to these girls to see, just to test the heroin she had. And that was a big, yeah, she had good stuff. I remember pretty well. And Porn, after that, I went back to the hotel, and it wasn't yet sure that the deal would occur, and I waited at the hotel with Bennett, Dopp, and Flanagan. And at some point, Porn gave a phone call at room 714, 716 at the Chiang Mai Orchid Hotel, and he says, yes, things will work out. I'm downstairs. I'm waiting for you. So at that point, it was Sunday night when that phone call came in the room, and informing us that the girls were downstairs and waiting to do the deal. The only thing is that DOP wanted to do the deal in a public place, and all the Thais so far refused to do that. They all wanted to do that in place away from people. And she came up. Nipa, the little Thai, one of the Thai women who got arrested, she came up with the idea to do the deal in the parking of a theater a couple blocks away from the hotel. And after a moment of thinking, W said yes, he agreed to that, and he decided to send Flanagan with me to drive around the block with her in her small pickup truck. And as we got to the pickup truck, Flanagan was nervous, and he asked if the drug was inside the truck. She said no, but she pointed out towards a scooter a little further down with someone who was holding on to it. And we drove to the parking lot a couple blocks away, and he started to looking at the place, and he asked me to go back to the hotel to tell the fat man and Bennett to bring the money. And because things were fine for him to do that there. Sorry. And I walked back to the hotel with Pim Pam, and I got there. Bennett was waiting outside with Girdlestone, the guy who was supposed to be their plane pilot, which I met by accident the day before, but it was just another small detail. And I thought my job was done because all I had to do, according to Glenn Barry, and after that Bennett and the others, DOP including DOP, was to introduce them to the source, and my job was done after that. And I was to walk away and leave them with Pim Pam to go back to the pickup truck to conclude their deal, their own transaction. And Bennett told me, he says, no, 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 you're coming with us. You are insurance that this whole deal will work out fine. So they took me up, and they brought me in a small taxi that drove by another pickup truck. We jumped in the box and drove a couple blocks away, and we got over there, and Girdlestone was holding on to the bag of heroin, not the bag of heroin, but the bag of money. They had brought to Thailand $70,000. They wanted to buy 10 kilos at first, and due to the price given to them, they were to buy only 5 kilos. and they had an agreement that Pim Pam wouldn't do 5 kilos at once with them, but only 2 kilos first, and if things work fine, they will do three others afterward. So the deal was done, and they had like 28 grand in their small pouch, and as soon as we got to the parking lot, Pim Pam asked Bennett and Flanagan to jump inside the box in the cargo area of her small pickup truck. Her small sister was there too. Her name was Pim Pam, and her brother was on a scooter nearby and waiting with the drug. And she signaled him to drive away, and she started driving away with the truck. But Bennett refused to climb in, and Girdlestone as well. And only Flanagan finally jumped in at the back with me, and we drove few hundred feet, and she started to go down the back lane and park it around a lamppost where there was nobody around, and we could do the deal without any problem, and it was still semi-public and there was some light, and but Bennett didn't want to come down the lane right away, and he stayed behind with Girdlestone. So after a moment, I walked with Girdlestone to them and asked them to bring the money. Pim Pam was following us few steps behind, and she told them to move their ass and to come and bring the money. At that point, Bennett got the money from Girdlestone, and he asked Girdlestone to stay behind by a phone booth, and we were, let's see, like a couple blocks away from there, from the where the transaction and the pickup truck was at that point, where she had parked the truck under the lamppost, and Girdlestone stayed there behind and waited for more order from Bennett. And at that point, we walked to the truck, and Flanagan was looking all around to see if he couldn't see Nipa's brother with the drug, and he was hidden with his back on the fence with a whole bunch of vegetation covering him. And it was dark, but by then it was like 8:40, I guess. When we got to the parking lot, it was already dark outside. And Bennett started to talk with Nipa at the front. He had half his body inside, and he was asking her where was the drug. And she wanted to see the money, and she says, "You won't see the money until I see the drug." So at some point, she called for her brother to come out from his hiding spot. And he walked out, he jumped over a small ditch, and he climbed at the back in the cargo area. And Flanagan was keeping his eyes on him. Myself, I was only by the bumper, the front bumper at the front of the pickup truck, and I was looking at everything unrolling and unfolding before my eyes. And at some point, Bennett screamed, asked Flanagan on a couple of occasions, "Have you seen the drug yet? Have you seen the drug yet?" And Flanagan was saying, "No, no, no." And at some point, as soon as Prapa, Pim Pam brother, got at the back of the truck, Flanagan saw the pack, and he started doing few going few steps forward, and he jumped on the guy like a tackle during a football game. And in the meantime, Bennett was showing the money to Nipa, but she realized all the money had been wrapped up with duct tape. She couldn't even see it. And as this happened and the fight broke at the back, she climbed down the truck, and she jumped on Flanagan's back as he was fighting with her brother. Meanwhile, Bennett was looking at this and decided to climb at the back as well to help Flanagan to fight Nipa and her brother. Myself, I was walking backward few steps, and at, at some point, I heard, as as the fight broke out, I heard police, police. That's the thing I forgot to tell you. This is when I realized that they were RCMP members, but the best is coming there. They were fighting at the back of the truck, and as I walked back, Pim Pam, the little sister of Nipa, was nearby. She jumped inside the truck and she tried to put the truck into gear and she choked. And the fight was still going on at the back, and I was walking backward. And at some point, she managed to just take off with the truck at the corner. She spun, turning right, and I started running. I started running, and as I turned the corner of the a block away from where they had left the scene, Girdlestone was coming running at me, and he just jumped on me and just threw me down a ditch, and he ended up on top of me. And as this occurred, my eyes stayed on the back alley, and all we could see at that point was the tail light of the pickup truck. And Girdlestone was just trying to keep me there. It was much bigger than me. I was only 120, it was 260. I mean, wasn't too hard, but the adrenaline and everything. And at some point, we heard a bang. A gun went off. And right away, Girdlestone asked me, "Who's got a gun? Where is your gun?" And I said, "No one's got any gun." So he put me back on my feet and he started screaming for his backup. The Thai police were supposed to be on the scene with them, but there was nobody. And maybe a certain amount of seconds went by before two Thai cops showed at the scene. And meanwhile, the pickup truck had left because when the gun went off, we saw the tail light at the back, the brake light shining out in the dark. And as soon as, I mean, in the time of a heartbeat, the truck started and started driving away once again. And Girdlestone tried to give me to a Thai police arriving at the scene, and because I was scared to be shot at that point, as he tried to hand me to the Thai police, I broke free and I started to run away. And Girdlestone started to scream at the Thai police to shoot me. And I saw the Thai police pulling out his Browning 357 silver. It glowed in the dark. And as soon as I saw that and I start to see the Thai police aiming at me, I dove to the ground and Girdlestone came back to pick me up and they put the handcuffs on me and brought me back where the truck was parked under the lamppost at the time the deal was supposed to go down. And Girdlestone really wanted to start running to go see what went on over there because he saw also that Flanagan and Bennett had been at the back of the truck, and after the gunshot, he surely had reason to worry about what went on. And as soon as he put me to the ground with my handcuffs in the back and he tied them up. He asked the Thai police to keep an eye on me. He started running. This is when I saw Barry Bennett walking out of the dark and he was holding on to Nipa with his right arm and what could have been a gun in his left hand. He was a left-hander, by the way, Bennett. Mm-hmm. And I say, holy shit, what the fuck went on? I didn't know yet. I couldn't see Flanagan at all. And as they brought Nipa to me, next to me, a couple of seconds later, a couple of cops came to pick me up and they started dragging me to a police car. And they threw me at the back with my hands tightened at the back. And I ended up with my lungs, my ribs, ending right on the lump between the two seats. And I ended up breaking my ribs and I started spitting blood right away. And Nipa came a few minutes later. But just before she came in, I saw that guy from the RCMP at the Canadian Embassy. I had seen him the day before, but I thought it was a tourist that was talking with jacked up at the PC around the pool at the hotel. But it was the yellow officer of the RCMP, and he started screaming to the Thai police while I was at the back of the car. He started screaming, "One of us got shot, one of us went down, one of us got shot, one of us went down." And then he saw me at the back and he realized that now I knew what went on. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he said that, I said, fuck, it has to be Flanagan. And after that, they brought Nipa and she told me that according to her, a gun went off as Bennett tried to break the back window of the pickup truck with the end of the butt of his gun, and the bullet would have gone off at that point, according to the Thais.
Mm.
This is what the Thais told me, and I don't think they had any reason to make
Yeah.
that up.
So really, it was is what we call an accidental discharge. But
Yeah,
the Mounties never did own up to the fact he was killed by a gunshot. Is that correct?
it is correct. They never acknowledged that. In fact, they said that actually, in all the newspaper and all through the media in Thailand for the next 2 days, it was reported in the newspaper, it was reported on television, on radio, that Derek Flanagan had been shot in the head, and that doctors at the hospital in Chiang Mai had pulled bullets from the back of his head.
Mm-hmm.
And after a couple of days, I saw the article in English in the newspaper, the Bangkok Post and the Nation. People can see it on my website. All these articles are there. Actually, I think part of this now has been removed yet. Part of the hacking a few days ago for the second time. And all the newspaper said everywhere that he had been shot. And more than that, the Thai police eyes asked my co-accused uh, who had shot the Falang. Falang, it's the word, the Thai word for foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, it was Flanagan. Why would the cop ask the Thais who had shot the foreigner? And even the chief of police in Chiang Mai, the day after the arrest, I was sick. I was puking and shitting everywhere. He's the one who gave me heroin to be able to follow the old parade that day. He's the one, once I got in his office, he said, Monsieur Olivier, you're very lucky that it's not the Thai police who got shot.
Mm-hmm.
You're very, very lucky. And he didn't tell me that once, he told me that twice. The first day after the arrest and the second day, he reminded me that I was lucky. And for those 2 days over there, the Thai police did a reenactment of the event, of the old transaction, except that they changed the old scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, even me, I wanted to object to that. I couldn't. There's some reporters, it was everything that the Thai police were doing was contrary to what had been reported by the media so far. And on the third day, that was General Bamru Ukrai, who was in charge of the Bangkok Metropolitan Unit. It's similar to the DEA in the United States. He went up to the media and he said that all the statement and reports about Derek Flanagan being shot and that the doctors had said that they had pulled a bullet from the back of his head were wrong, they were false, and that media members often make error in stories like that. That was the end of the story as far as the media were concerned with Flanagan's death in Thailand. And meanwhile, when I was arrested, when we were transferred to Bangkok, they sat us on an army plane and right next to the coffin of Derek Flanagan at the back of the plane. And I think that was done on purpose. And I told them, I say, you must be ashamed of yourself. You cannot even look at your friend who died, and that's your fault if he's dead. The RCMP doesn't have the authorization to be over there like it got from the Solicitor General of Canada, which is actually the public safety minister, who's in charge of the RCMP, because only the minister can decide if there will be responsibility agreement between the two countries and human rights, Canadian human rights, the charter has to be followed and etc. etc. And they have to look at how Thailand runs its business over there in terms of human rights before bringing someone over there. In the same way as in Canada, in the Byrne case, when they wanted to extradite him to United States, to where he faced the death sentence for murder, The minister went to bat. He said, as long as we don't get an express letter from the American government that that guy won't be executed, the charter keep us from from extraditing him to you. They have to send me to Thailand. They engineer an operation that cost them over $1 million to buy a couple kilos of heroin. Their friend was killed over there through all that. And all the documents, what is even more most shocking afterward, as I realized over the years, is that all the documents from the RCMP depicted me as some kind of Pablo Escobar on the West Coast about heroin.
Yeah.
And that the bust in Thailand had stopped an old pipeline. That was all false. And I had to fight against that. And when they took me to prison, a couple of weeks after that, that was when I met Victor Malarek, who came to visit me because at the Globe and Mail, after he saw the press release from the RCMP, he felt that something didn't jive up, and he decided to travel over there in Bangkok to interview me to see what went on. And as a result of his article, once he got back to Canada, the RCMP Public Complaint Commission in Ottawa, the chairman of the commission decided to file complaints against the RCMP with regard to their conduct and my treatment in this whole operation. And their inquiry went on for a few years. And the guy who was in charge of the inquiry was a pretty nice guy, was Paul McEwen. He died a few years ago, and he was an attorney, criminal lawyer working for that commission. And the guy who was directing the commission, however, happens to be a longtime friend of the RCMP superintendent in charge of the operation in Thailand. And that guy used to be ex-deputy commissioner of the RCMP, and he was the guy in charge of looking over all complaints against the RCMP. This is how it started. And when Paul McEwen finished his inquiry on March 6, 91, he filed a report. But the report was too critical of the RCMP, and they just shoved it away and put it in the drawer. And what they did, they rewrote it, and the original report had 176 pages. And when the report came back, the final report, there was only 130 something pages. 40 pages went out just because too critical of the RCMP. And they kept hiding that. For many years, I had to fight to get these information. McEwen's report took several years before I could get it through access of information.
Really. So yeah. We're up here about 55 minutes here. Let's do a second episode. Can you do a second episode and talk about your time in prison and then writing the book and working on the movie? Okay, let's do that. I'm going to finish this off now and I'll come back to you.
Okay.
I really appreciate you. That's been a heck of a story, Alain. It's like riveting. I'm sitting here. I can't even hardly think of a question I don't want to break in because it is a heck of a story. You're a good storyteller. And folks, that movie.
One reporter called his article at some point here in Quebec from La Presse. It says, when reality goes beyond fiction.
Really? That's a good one. Yes, that is a good one. It was, and that movie was great. It was riveting, and your book's good too. I've just got started on it. Name of your book is.
I only got 5-star reviews so far for the book.
Yeah, I'll give you one. I just haven't got back to it yet. So the name of the book is Good Luck, Frenchy.
Yeah, and I will tell you why. Because
one last thing. Tell us why it's Good Luck, Frenchy. This is cold, man. This is cold.
After my arrest. I spent like 18 months before the court, over a period of 18 months. Yeah, I've been to court like 19 times altogether, 20 times over 18 months.
That's in Thailand.
In Thailand. And the RCMP came to testify on, Bennett and Dupp testified on November 14, 1989, and Girlstone on November 21st, 1989. And the cover picture of my book, that is me here in chain with 40 pounds of chains around my ankle, and the picture was taken by Girlstone. And he smiled at me. He says, "Smile for our album souvenir." This is what he told me, and he took the picture. The week before, when Dot and Bennett testified, they perjured themselves not only about Flanagan's death, but they went as far as to tell the Thai court that I had a criminal record in Canada, that was behind a pipeline of heroin to Canada, and so on and so on and so on. And nothing of it was true. None of it was true. And they used that to have me sentenced to death over there. And at the end of the day, the testimony started at 9 in the morning, and we got out of court. I think it was like almost 8 o'clock at night, or 7:30, when they brought us back in the bullpen, and they brought us back to the prison with 200 guys screaming to get back to prison, but
Yeah.
they're not taking off until we're done. And Bennett, and like I said, Bennett ended up perjured himself. And at the end of the day, as soon as Bennett testimony was over, Dub came to see me, and he slapped me in the back as we walked out, and he says, "Good luck, Frenchy."
Boy, that was cold. Boy, that was cold, dude.
Yeah,
Man.
he
All
said,
right, let's come back and talk about what happened after the trial.
well, after